price and grow vegetables that can be kept for a time being and released when the price is high, or they are growing more disease resistant and also efficient products to prevent crop failures, or local distribution, local farming, which I think in Europe is very much of a pioneer and very much active in, and local production as well. Now, education for me is one of the most important aspects, because without education, really no one can come up with it. So there's a lot of movement of design, using design tools for universal education, but giving access by mobile library, or having a collaborative platform, the one I showed in terms of having a collaboration voices, not to isolate design from rest of a dialogue, or integrating, in this case, is integrating music into the curriculum of students in Senegal remote area and so forth. Last part of it is, it's very sad for me, but at the same time, it has a hope. As a design council, we started to invite Japanese government. This is the crest of Prime Minister's office here. This little 3-leaf, and it's black. And we were in conversation, why don't you turn this into green? And since Japan has a sustainable technology, and it has a very strict policy for sustainability and energy efficiency, and we've been talking to Prime Minister's office with World Economic Forum to promote environmental index, which will monitor carbon emission, energy use as a global platform, as a voluntary system, meaning that there's no way the policy is not working somehow. But in a way, can we make up a platform which is initiated by a government and also business to work it through? And we made this particular dial of, to create an index which gives incentive to business. Japan has this return on carbon called ROC since 2007, which monitors CO2 use of many corporations. And Boston Consulting Group has started it in Japan. It's not in English, but they are willing to translate the same system to be globally used. They came up with this incentive index to promote investment so that corporation can be more attractive. And byproduct is improved environment, but we see nothing wrong with it. It's actually a very good way to include large businesses in this incentive. The monitoring was done of all the people. Tokyo Electric now is famous for the nuclear meltdown. But they have a track record of monitoring household appliances to see CO2 use. It's just because household has been monitoring quite a bit of also electricity use. And then enforcement, and also the government was willing to coordinate a lot of enforcement so that one can have a central use for this. So this is much more voluntary idea, and this was going on. But then, literally, the next day, we were talking to these people, and disaster hit. And we, all of us, really had to completely change plans in order to reach out to NGO. I'm a trustee of Architecture for Humanity United States, and trying to talk to Cameron Sinclair to see how they can engage this in the reconstruction effort. But somehow, the entire networks that we had in Japan were the same people. We are trying to build up this environmental index systems. We had this network. And Kohei, who was also involved in it, he has Elephant Design, some of you might know, open source platform for consumer products issue. He quickly made a site for translation for expats called Honyaquake, which is Japanese. Honyaku means translation, earthquake, Honyaquake. It was very quickly, it's only down for 14 days just to quickly adjust to it. And we were just telling Prime Minister's office to start Twitter. And they started Twitter because we are asking them to Twitter and they make a Facebook platform to connect these environmental issues. And of course, we left Tokyo Electric alone because they are too busy. But then we kind of came up with this environment index. But there's an interesting lesson learned, and these are some of the posters which is voluntarily made to save energy and conserve electricity, which if you go to a site of Setsuden, SCTSUDEN.com, hundreds of beautifully designed posters all over voluntarily saving electricity. It's just because nuclear plants provided 30 to 50% of electric power to Tokyo. And if they don't save it, not only would they have a blackout, but they will be cutting off electricity to the areas they need the most. So there's a voluntary effort which is going on. So in a way, through this monitoring of electricity is taking place, and we witnessed that the community is coming together. And what was so, I think this is lesson learned, but in a way, it's a discovery for design community. And this is the last slide I'm showing today, is the fact that carbon portal we conceived as an environmental index was what you call a preventative measure. And then it's a daily measure to really figure out what are incentives for different energy, what are regulations, and what are monitoring. But then somehow that same network we had became what you call, it's disruptive, but it became a risk response network and risk response index. Now, this sounds like common sense to you, but discovery here is that if one has a very robust network and the relationship to it that one can use right away in these disaster successions. And in terms of Japan, there was a failure of a phone lines and mobile network didn't work, cell phone didn't work, but email worked. So we were twittering, Facebook, emailing everybody to connect them to everybody else, and then fundraising was made that way. And we were able to connect through these platforms. And it just transformed from incentive to materials or well-being, and regulations assisted in safety, monitoring turned into communication devices. So what happened is that Carbon Portal, which is top-down platform, flipped completely to bottom-up measure. And this is the last thing I really like this community. I was talking to people, Alvin, and also Belgrade, and Jishan, BIlbao, is that we realize that when there's a crisis, no one is prepared to use a new network or able to learn something. And people communicate, use existing locally reliable network to obtain information, to check with each other, and then to assure their safety, and then help each other. And as I said before, in the beginning, designers, we have imagination, observation, and with a vision arc, we are starting to collect narrative stories, what you think, that something everyday network you know. As small as, for example, like my mom is 86 in Tokyo, she needs medication. The pharmacy system that tracks medicines figure out which elderly are not receiving medication, and they can check the safety of elderly. And then if they can't reach them, they made an effort to reach them, bring the medicines. It's something, again, it's an everyday network we don't think of using for this network, but it completely works. And also, for example, if there's a pastry shop, somebody comes and buys the same bread all the time, which might work in European context. All of a sudden, patisseries, they realize the person didn't come, what's happened. So this is kind of really related to everyday rituals that we have. And another example is a lighting system, which monitors energy, which is monitoring classrooms or rooms like that. In a time of crisis, they can monitor to see if people have evacuated, if anybody's trapped, things like that. So we are collecting those stories, and I hope you will join to collect, because those stories, we can feed it back to World Economic Forum or global leaders, and then that will really, that's actually out-of-box thinking, and that's a good design, repurposing, reusing, and I think this will be a very, one powerful, good things we could do together. But thank you so much for your patience.
Muy bien. Bueno, jaun Andreok bukatu dugu goizeko programazioa.